NASDAQ finishing the day at record highs, closing above 16,000 for the first time ever. Here to talk more about the market and his portfolio positioning, Dan Niles, founder and portfolio manager at the Satori Fund. Dan, always good to have you. Welcome.
My pleasure, Sarah.
So I know we're in for a seasonally strong period here going into the end of the year, but 2022, you're thinking doesn't look so hot. What's your forecast?
My forecast, since the beginning of the year was we're going to get a lot of inflation and the Fed would be forced to taper and then they would be forced to tighten. So far, that's kind of headed down that path with inflation at 30-year highs, but the Fed hasn't started their tapering yet. So the balance sheet, if you look at, the Fed balance sheet that was just released for this last week, it was at 8.7 trillion. So the tapering is scheduled to start sometime later this month. And you've got valuations at all-time record highs. So I think you combine that together, and at some point, kicking and screaming, the Fed will be forced to raise rates multiple times next year, because at a certain point, inflation starts to hurt, poor people the most, and that's not something that's going to be politically they can put up with. So we think tech's going to be tough next year. We think the S&P will be down next year, and so our portfolio is built around those themes that the inflation matters and stimulus matters.
So in an environment like that, let's just play that out. Does big cap tech outperform?
Well, you have to be careful. It depends on what you define as big cap tech. So for me, I look at it as big cap growth at a reasonable price tech. So names like Facebook, Google, Amazon, companies that generate profits, that have big moats, et cetera, they're going to do well. Names where you've got electric vehicles, 10 years from now that are going to be huge, or biotech or crypto that's going to take over from gold and take over the banking world. Those names that are long duration assets with no profits, no income, losing lots of money, I think you're going to have a massive problem. So I think that's the differentiation I would make. So we own Facebook, we own Google, but we are short some of these, latter EV names that have come public, but we're long some other electric vehicle type plays that are at much more reasonable valuations underneath it in materials and out of China.